Whenever I try to think of what God might actually be like, I try to think of the most far out thing I can possibly imagine. Most religions who espouse a divine deity of any kind tend to describe it as being impossible to, well, describe. So I try to imagine what God could be in his, her, its most extreme form. Be it thinking beyond the very personal monotheistic Christian style God, or the more abstract belief in polytheistic gods, where God is fractured into many gods, or the even more abstract image of animistic belief systems, where gods are more like spirits inhabiting the land, the streams, the hills, the sun, the rain, etc. Or pantheistic slash panentheistic ideas, where we are all either God itself or we're somehow inside of God. Perhaps God was somehow a consciousness created by all human thought, or is maybe even an amalgamation of all that reality is. The universe, the multiverse, the worlds beyond the worlds, or folded up in tiny little pocket dimensions. Or God is something outside of even that. Perhaps whatever contains the universe, or that which created it and merely maintains what we call reality. Is God nothing but a hope in man's imagination that might one day prove to be true? Does God even matter? I mean, does it matter whether or not God exists? Or rather, our vision of God, does that matter? When I was young, I couldn't imagine seeing God any differently than, well, I saw him in my head. Why? Because I very loosely saw God as a giant mountain. Probably because I needed an image for God as something, and there was a mountain on one of the pages in the Bible story books I was read to as a young child. So, I grabbed the first image I saw. Did it change anything for me to eventually stop seeing God as a mountain and start looking at him as more of an old man when I was introduced to pictures of God in flowing robes and a white beard? Well, I'm not sure I actually ever related to that particular image, but let's just say I did. The old man with a beard was just a different image, representing something which probably has no observable image. Did anything change when I started looking at God as something completely formless, genderless, probably well beyond our own concept of good and evil, beyond the laws of what we even refer to as reality? To believe beyond rationality, beyond faith, beyond the very limits of my own imagination? Whatever the furthest out concept we could ever imagine is probably wrong, because the answer will be so far beyond our comprehension that it wouldn't even make sense if we knew that right now. I feel the truth must be far beyond my own imagination. So, purely by virtue of my limited human experience, how could I possibly judge someone else's view of reality? We don't know what any of this is really all about. We don't know what lies beyond our own senses. In a few hundred years, our own existence could be so far removed from what we think of as reality today, none of what anyone believes right now, be they atheist or believer or whatever you would call me, will even make sense to the people of the future who have melded with AI and computers are evolving into different forms of existence or whatever. And maybe at that point, we're just starting to talk to other intelligent forms of life. And it turns out they were always out there, living in extra dimensional space or something. But it took 500 years for us to evolve the technology, or rather the mental acuity, to establish any kind of communication with them. Because any form of advanced civilization won't just have spaceships. They'll already have melded with their own technology, and for all I know, are more energy than matter now. They'll be thinking on levels we could never imagine right now, because we're not anywhere near that today. We still think time is real. We still think we live on the outside of a giant chunk of rock we call a planet, and all we see is the surface of our own bodies, the surface of items. When you pick up a rock, the only thing you can perceive is its surface, how it looks, how it feels, how heavy it is. But the rock is a solid object we can only see because light is bouncing off its surface. We are looking at the universe through a pinhole. And no matter what religion we might be, or what humanistic ideology we might possess, we are all looking at the divine through a similar pinhole. These are the kinds of thoughts I like to ponder when I think about the petty things people get into fights over. Not only race and politics, family squabbles, misunderstandings between men and women, and whatever other kinds of conflicts one can think of. At the end of the day, there's a lot of reality left to explore, spiritually, technologically, philosophically. And I try to remember all that when I have a disagreement with someone over anything from religion to politics. It doesn't always work, but I try to see beyond my own ego, my own perspective, and realize that there are much more important things out there. Fighting might progress us forward in some ways, but I like to think we can move beyond that form of evolution to something, well, I don't know, more evolved? At least I hope so. I'm the Urban Omnist.